it's cold out today. What the heck is going on in California, dude? It's so bizarre. This is my Ducati 698. Today we're going to be taking it to a little cars and coffee event this morning. I don't know if you can tell, I'm not a morning person, so I'm feeling freaking tired here. But we're going to be taking this bike, flying up to cars and coffee. We're going to be getting some caffeine in my system so that way we are awake. I'm not the fanciest one here, but I'm by far gotta be the loudest.
Are you the YouTube guy?
What's up?
Are you the YouTube guy?
Yeah, I do YouTube.
We're huge fans.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
How do you like that thing?
I love it. I just saw the other duck, so I wanted to park next to it. So I was like, I don't know if there's like any other bikes around here, but I saw you have the track, so I assume there's probably more.
I have a street triple down there. I parked next to an R1.
So we've made it to Rancho Santa Fe Cars and Coffee. I, of course, had to park next to the other duck over here. This is a Multistrada Pikes Peak, which I actually got a chance to test ride one of these bikes. I still have yet to edit and post that video. I'm getting around to it, I promise. But those are phenomenal bikes.
And where I'm going right now, about an hour and a half away, I'm going all the way to downtown Borrego Springs.
I have a bunch of bikes I would never buy in my entire life. Okay, cool. Well, this is a massive dealership. This reminds me of the one I saw in Florida when I was in Fort Lauderdale for a little bit. Look at this. California has their own little like motorcycle parking spots. It's so cute. Yoink. It's great. Let's just walk in. Okay, so first of all, I'm seeing an Africa Twin. This is something I would never see back home. Yeah, back in Ohio, usually whenever these come in, people are very, very quick to buy these up. They're really good bikes. Honda quality. Meanwhile, you're getting like 100 horsepower out of a 270-degree crank parallel twin. I'm seeing a lot of sport touring bikes. Not quite an R9, but this is a M209 SP. This is basically as close to a Yamaha R9 that you can get right now before those start getting delivered. Brembo brakes, KYB suspension, really good. This is why I came here. I wanted to see bikes that you don't typically usually see out and about. And what's nice about me actually seeing this bike in person is it makes me a little bit more excited for the R9. See, I've been battling in my head. Should I cancel my R9 order? I don't know, but seeing this in person, seeing the quality of Yamaha, seeing all the buttons laid out, I mean, this is the exact same like button layout that the new R9 is going to have, so it's just nice to see and play around with. It makes me a little bit more excited to see that like Yamaha does actually have some quality to it. They are built well. So I don't know, I just don't like spending money, if you can't tell. I like having money in my bank account. I don't like spending it. And here's the Gixxer 1000. This is actually I hate to say it, this is a bike I was considering canceling my Yamaha R9 for. Believe it or not, I know, crazy thought, right? But the thing is, savings, incentives, these bikes are actually quite comparable in price to the Yamaha R9. The R9, of course, is going to have way more technology, but as I've matured as a rider, I've realized that technology doesn't do anything but just slow you down. Technology sucks. I hate technology. I can't stand it. Oh my god, they have both the CBR and a Gixxer 1000 here. This is literally perfect. I'm going to take all my stuff off so I can better compare these bikes. So before we jump into this full comparison, I just want you guys to realize the Gixxer 1000 and the CBR are both two bikes I'm considering canceling my Yamaha R9 order for. Now, the reason for that is I worry that the R9 is not going to be exciting enough for me. $12,500 I'm going to be paying for an R9 for what is essentially 120 horsepower, a bike that weighs just as much as one of these bikes do. These bikes are pretty light for a 1000cc motorcycle. Meanwhile, the Ducati V2, the brand new Ducati V2 exists, which I feel like completely nullifies the existence of the Yamaha R9 because it makes the same amount of horsepower, but it makes more torque and it weighs less weight. So the existence of the new V2, while the new V2 is going to be more expensive than the Yamaha R9, if you have the interest of buying the best motorcycle possible, why would you buy an R9 over a Ducati V2, besides the fact that it's just cheaper, which, I mean... So the reason I like the Gixxer a lot, this bike lacks a lot of technology, which I used to look at as a negative, but as I've kind of matured as a rider, I've realized it's kind of the opposite. So not having a lot of technology, not relying on a lot of that tech actually ends up making you a better rider because you're not worried about how the technology is going to mess you up. You're only focused on what you're doing. You don't have to worry about traction control accidentally slipping you out in a corner because you're riding safer with all of that stuff turned off. So if I were to buy a Gixxer, I would actually just turn everything off anyway and just ride the bike like it's meant to be ridden. Kind of like what I was doing on my S1000 anyway. When I owned my BMW S1000, even though it's one of the most technologically advanced bikes in the market, I was just turning off all the tech anyway and just riding it like it's meant to be ridden. So I don't know the exact weight of this bike sitting on it. This is a slightly upgraded version of the base Gixxer. So what that comes with, you have steel braided brake lines. You don't get that on the regular version. And you also get slightly nicer suspension that you also don't get on the base version. Seating position is somewhat upright, oddly. I know everyone calls the BMW S1000, I'm comparing this a lot to the BMW S1000RR, of course. I oddly think that this bike is more comfortable than the BMW S1000RR. It's probably gonna be a hot take. Just sitting on this, the seat is a little bit more plush than my BMW was. Triple tree, it feels like the bars are a little bit more raised than my BMW was, and the weight is incredibly manageable considering it still has a stock pipe on here and everything is still stock. Paint quality seems really nice on these bikes. I mean, everybody says the Gixxer is not high quality. I absolutely disagree. The paint quality on this bike is great. The build quality, everything looks like it's built very solidly. Yeah, these bikes, people say, are not built well. I have never heard of someone having an issue that was not caused by the rider on these bikes. Enough about the Gixxer, let's talk about the Honda next. This is another bike I was considering canceling my R9 order for. And the thing I like about the Honda is their quality. They're very high quality motorcycles. I can already tell you, it's much lighter than the Gixxer. The build quality and the paint quality on the Gixxer was good. The build quality on this bike is better. Just right off the bat, you can just immediately tell the paint quality, it may not be entirely there. Seating position on this bike, dare I say, almost slightly more comfortable than the Gixxer. I mean, the Gixxer was already very comfortable. I mean, you can even see the clip-ons on this bike are slightly raised. It is a very comfortable super bike. This one also, while it's a very small screen, still has a screen, has a lot more technology that I would probably turn off regardless. The only downside is it has worse brakes, worse suspension than the Gixxer. So yeah, it does have more technology. You're trading that off for things that matter more. Like, I think good suspension and good brakes matter way more than having technology on your bike. I do like how this is a plastic tank though. It has a metal tank underneath, but it is a plastic tank cover, and so if you want to swap out all the fairings on it, you can swap it out to whatever color that you desire at any point, at any time, as long as you can afford the fairings. You don't have to paint any tanks. You don't have to have any stupid tank covers that cover the metal on any other motorcycle. But the build quality on these bikes are good. Both these bikes are like hyper reliable. I've never heard of people having issues with the Honda or the Suzuki. So I don't know, it's just tough. It's really hard to make a decision here, if it's even the right decision to make. Honda is just another one of those bikes that I've never heard of people having issues with one of these. When this bike is turned on, that screen is a full color display with all the technology like wheel control, slide control, all that stuff. Meanwhile, the Gixxer is gonna have this like, it's kind of like a calculator screen. I gotta be honest, sitting on these bikes side by side, and from what I've heard about riding characteristics of both of these bikes, I think the Gixxer is better. That's not to drag the Honda for any means. I think the Honda is built very well. It's built with that Honda quality, they're phenomenal bikes. I just think the quality and touching the Gixxer, and again, based off of the riding characteristics from what people say the Gixxer is a much smoother ride. The Gixxer is a lot easier to ride hard. Meanwhile, the Honda is a little bit more resistant to things like that. I wish it was just a matter of like, oh, the Honda's higher quality, but the Gixxer rides better. I think that they have very similar quality, but the Suzuki also has the advantage of supposedly riding better than the Honda. Something to think about. Or do you think I should keep my R9 order and stick with the Yamaha? I'm not really considering an R1. A 2025 R1, I would have to pay full price for that. I don't really want to pay full price for my super bike. And there also might be another motorcycle coming to the page very soon that's very similar to an R1 that's going to blow the R1 out of the water anyway. This is more of like nice, reliable Japanese bike I'm interested in with a flat plane inline 4, because I miss my BMW a little bit, but I also don't want to go through the action of buying other BMWs, so Japanese bikes are a little bit better. Gixxer or Honda, what would you choose? So I think in 2025, the majority of people's dream bikes are going to be the Kawasaki H2, some sort of Japanese 1000, Ducati V4. This, I think, would be my dream bike in 2025. Not because of how difficult it is to buy. I mean, these bikes, MSRP is like $12,000. Dealership in particular has this bike listed for $10,000. You're paying a lot for what you actually get, but it's not that expensive as something like a Ducati V4. It's going to be like $25,000 starting MSRP. Now, the reason that this is one of my dream bikes, shut up, God, you know, things loud. So the only reason I haven't bought a bike like this is because of how difficult this bike is not only to own, but to maintain. So the fact of the matter is, this is a factory race bike. We're talking no brake lights, no turn signals, requires a hefty amount of maintenance to keep running, and which is the main reason why I haven't bought one of these bikes. They literally require like full engine rebuilds like every 12 hours. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's something ridiculous. Now, that doesn't mean I don't love these bikes to death. I mean, since it's a factory race bike, it doesn't have any of the bloat. It has a full straight pipe exhaust pretty much straight from the factory. I believe these make like 60 horsepower from the factory, but yet only weigh about 275 pounds. And so since this is a race bike and requires to have like much more maintenance than a typical regular bike, that's the reason I haven't been able to own one of these. On top of the fact that they don't have a Husqvarna dealer nearby my house. I think the closest one back home where I live in Cleveland, the closest one's gonna be like 60, 70 miles away. So this is literally the first time I've ever seen one of these bikes in person, and it is holding up to its reputation as just a beautiful example of a race bike. I could move it one-handed. It's ridiculous, bro. It looks so good too. So a big reason why I fell in love with these bikes in the first place was actually because of the Killer Cam, another motor vlogger who has unfortunately quit in his escapades. Towards the end of his YouTube posting, he bought one of these bikes, and seeing how he was ripping that bike up and down Pennsylvania roads, it really resonated with me, and I love that whole vibe of just popping wheelies, hanging out with friends. That is just the best part about riding, and that's exactly what this bike exemplifies. It's just that whole spirit about popping wheelies, not giving a single F about what anybody thinks, and just doing your own thing. Much more chill ride than something like a Panigalve V4 or Gixxer 1000. This is the epitome of just going out for a nice ride. It's not comfortable by any stretch of the imagination. The seat's super uncomfortable and all that lightweight. You're not going on the highway on this thing. It's just, there's no way. You are gonna need a truck if you're gonna own something like this, and that's just, it is what it is. As of now, as of about 2 months ago, I do own a truck now, so I could buy something like this. I could trail it around, take it to cities, and I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world, right? I love how you can hear how it has a direct throttle connection too. That's perfect. That's mint. The fact that this bike doesn't need any modification from the factory other than, well, actually it needs a few things. It needs that front tire replaced because you can't have slicks on the street. As soon as you hit a patch of gravel, you're going down. So you would need to be able to swap out that tire and put something with a little bit more of a grippy tire compound. Something with, you know, holes in it that can actually hold up. Next, you're gonna need headlights, brake lights, turn signals, everything that you would need to be legal on the street. And then on top of that, you need to get this thing registered on the street, which is also gonna be even more time and money in order to get this thing registered. But all of that really doesn't deter me. It's more of the maintenance that this bike requires from you. It needs an absurd amount of maintenance. There's an absurd maintenance schedule on these bikes, and it's just unfortunate that it is what it is. But more so than any Japanese 1000 or any 1000 in general, or really any bike, this is one of my dream bikes. And it just sucks that back home there's not a dealership that's close enough in order for me to justify it. Perhaps maybe one day. And actually, these guys were telling me that they would be willing to ship it to me in Ohio if I bought it from them. So something worth looking into. I don't know. Next up on my list is going to be, of course, you guys already knew this was coming. This is the Ducati V4, new for 2025. So of course, if you guys have been watching my page, I took one of these bikes on a test ride right before coming to California. It's really cool to see that they're getting delivered pretty much nationwide at this point. But what I loved about this bike in particular was the new throttle that they added to this thing. It's very much BMW coated, which is a very good thing for me. I really liked my BMW S1000RR. It was one of the easiest 1000cc bikes to ride in my opinion. The wheelies on it were buttery smooth and I love that bike. However, the worst part about owning my BMW was the fact that it was a BMW. I've commonly said in my videos before, owning the BMW was kind of like, once I felt like I gave them my money, it was like, that was it. They don't care about you as a consumer anymore once you've given them the money for the bike, and they don't really have an interest in keeping you as a returning customer. However, my experience with Ducati, on the other hand, has been the complete opposite. Once I bought my old V4 and once I bought my 698 that's currently sitting out there right now, it feels like I have continuous support from the dealer. They're constantly figuring out ways to save not only me money, saves them money, and in the long run makes everybody happy, which is why Ducati as a brand has really earned my respect, not only from their dealers but as a company themselves. Instead of listening to all the cries of the fanboys online who were crying about the loss of the single-sided swing arm, they genuinely went out of their way to make a good bike. Yeah, people are going to kick, whine, and scream about the previous generation, how it looked better. Single-sided swing arm aside, I can literally guarantee you anybody who rides the previous generation back to back with this new one, you're going to be shocked at how much better it is. Now, the Ducati Diavel was another dream bike of mine for a very long time, and I may have even expressed some level of regret on video before about how I bought my previous generation of Panigalve V4 over this generation of Ducati Diavel V4. Now, the comparison has kind of fallen apart to me a little bit now that the new Panigalve is so much more rideable than the old one. Like, that's how much of a difference. Like, I know I've been saying this over and over again, how the new Panigalve is more rideable than the old one, but like, I genuinely need people to realize how much of a difference that has made, because yes, the Diavel is a phenomenal bike. It's one of my favorites of all time. Every time I've ridden it, I love it. It's such a powerful little cruiser. It has the same amount of character as a Panigalve V4, but with the aim of giving you much more rider comfort so you can take it on longer distances. But now that comparison has kind of fallen apart a little bit, now that the new Panigalve is so much more rideable. Don't really see much of a point of buying the Diavel over the Panigalve anymore, considering that this bike is still costs more. And now the only benefit is going to be, well, yes, it has a much more comfortable riding position. It also has longer service intervals. So since it has a Gran Turismo V4 over the Desmosedici V4 that's in the Panigalve, this bike can go like 36,000 miles without valve service interval as well. That still is at 15,000 miles for valve services. So that is
Unfortunately, now the only advantage to why you would want to buy a Diavel over a Panigalve is just that riding position and the longer service intervals. It used to be, the old Panigalve used to be like a bull that would like constantly trying to throw you off, and it was almost borderline impossible to ride like a 600, while the new Panigalve, you can ride chill. So there's, I don't know, if you're someone like me who wants a lot of that character and wants the, you know, the flashiness of a sport bike and wants the capability of a sport bike, but still wants like some level of comfort, I don't see why I would buy a Diavel anymore. Still love the Diavel, don't get me wrong. And I think if you really need, like if let's say your back's really messed up or like your wrists hurt all the time, you need a Diavel. Still a phenomenal bike. Still, like, I would call it a dream bike. If I had unlimited money, for sure, I would buy one. But when the Panigalve is as good as it is now, like, it's kind of crazy that this bike dropped, considering I literally, after I crashed, dude, after I crashed my old Panigalve, I literally put a deposit in on a black Diavel. But the Ducati salesman told me the weight, and I'm glad he did. I'm so happy he told me the weight, because the new Panigalve literally is everything I thought it would be. My S1000 and my old Panigalve V4 combined into one bike, and that is, it's just that good. Next up is a motorcycle that I see all the time on social media. If you spend any amount of time watching motovloggers on YouTube, Instagram, anything, you've probably seen MV Agusta before. Now, I don't want to call this one of my dream bikes because I've never ever in my life ridden an MV Agusta. All I know are the opinions of others. Although it's hard to deny that this bike doesn't look pretty, I mean, it looks pretty sick, dude. And MV Agusta is being smart about how they're building their brand. They're hiring as many people as KTM is firing. Like, as a company, they're doing well. I have heard mixed opinions about how these bikes actually ride. Now, it's kind of like 50-50 split. I've heard a lot of people say that they ride really good and that they're full of character, and it's kind of like if Triumph and Ducati had a baby, which to me sounds like it would ride excellent. But I've also heard mixed things from other people saying that, like, if you try riding them really hard, they can have like valve float and things like that. They're not built as well as other brands. But that could also be an elitist view. There could be people that, the people that say good things could feel really elitist because they spend all the money on them. They want them to be good bikes, and that's why they always talk good about them. But on the other side of that, you could also have people who can't afford them who talk bad about them because the fact that they can't afford them and they want to feel good about themselves. I don't know. It's really hard to get a good opinion about a bike that I've never ridden before, and I've never had a chance to ride one. So if there's any MV Agusta reps watching this video, I would love an opportunity to ride one of your bikes. Just as an education. They feel, I don't know, everything's so different on these things. Like, all the buttons are so set up differently. It's a very unique brand. I would love the chance to ride one of these. So the last bike I want to talk about is, of course, my Ducati 698. This is commonly what I've referred to as one of my favorite bikes of all time. I feel very fortunate to have gotten into one of these bikes because I don't feel like a lot of motorcycle YouTubers or Instagram people like talk about this bike. So essentially what this bike is to me, in my opinion, it is the crossover between a naked bike and the FS450 that we were just looking at inside the dealership. Well, yeah, it's not as extreme as the FS450. It has much longer service intervals. You're looking at valves every 18,000 miles, oil every 9,000 miles. What that allows me to do is I can ride this bike around an area like here in California, and I don't have to worry about the insane service intervals that the FS450 has, but this bike is going to be a lot more fun to rip around as compared to like a regular naked bike, like an MT-07. Still has the high quality suspension and Brembo brakes that the FS450 has, yet it weighs a little bit more. Since this is a street legal bike, it comes with turn signals, headlights, all that good stuff. But the issue is this bike still weighs 330 pounds wet, ready to ride, while the FS450 is going to be sub 300 pounds. Both these bikes also make similar horsepower numbers. I think the FS450 makes a little bit less horsepower, but that's going to be a full-on race motor as compared to this bike that just has a regular street motor. I really wish Ducati made like a 450 supermoto that I could buy, and like you would have to maintain it super meticulously. Like, it's fine. Like, I wouldn't mind buying it because I have a Ducati dealer located nearby my house, but the Husqvarna to me is a little bit harder to justify since I don't have a Husqvarna dealership nearby, and so it's like if anything goes wrong, I'd be kind of stuck on my own. And parts for that bike would be really hard to get, while parts for this bike are really easy to get. And I haven't had any problems with this bike, so it's like, this bike is proven reliable, and you can kind of neglect this thing. I've already put on almost 1,000 miles here in California on this bike, and I haven't had a single issue, not a single stutter the entire time. So it's like, it's really hard to justify getting a bike that, like, you know, is going to require a lot of maintenance and a lot of potentially a lot of problems. Meanwhile, I have a bike that's like comparable that doesn't have all the downsides. This is still a street bike. This is like still has the same, if not less, maintenance intervals than like any of these other street motorcycles. But yeah, I can still pick up the front wheel in third gear and wheelie everywhere and like throw this thing across corners, and it's still super light compared to most bikes. So it's like, well, dare I say, like, perfection is really hard to meet. This is about as close as you can get to perfection without the downsides of like maintenance intervals and all the complicated stuff. Dream bikes are dream bikes for a reason, but sometimes compromise can be just as good as well. One last thing before we get out of here, one big shout out to Moto Forza for letting me film out here. This is the second time they've now let me film out here in California, and they were giving me a really good deal on that FS450 over there that we might have to take them up on depending on how things go out here. I'm extremely tempted to buy that thing. It would be really sick to have. Hey, like the video so I can go buy the FS450. That helps me out. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. My name's been ThoughTaken, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.